At 6:37 a.m. on October 25, 1944, Avenger pilot William Brooks breaks radio silence. His voice cracks through the static. Major portion of the Japanese fleet sighted. 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, 10 destroyers. 20 miles west, heading directly toward you. Commander Ernest Evans, 36 years old, part Cherokee, part Creek, stands on the bridge of the USS Johnston. He's been awake for 22 hours straight. The destroyer under his command displaces 2,050 tons. She carries 5 5-inch guns and 10 torpedoes. Behind him, 6 escort carriers, flat tops with wooden decks and half-inch steel hulls, hold every American plane protecting General MacArthur's invasion beaches at Leyte Gulf. Between those carriers and the Japanese fleet steaming toward them, Johnston and 6 other tin cans. 22 minutes later, the horizon erupts. The battleship Yamato, 72 800 tons, 9/18. 1-inch guns, the largest warship ever built, opens fire from 19 miles away. Each shell weighs 3,220 pounds. They shriek through the dawn like freight trains. The first salvo straddles the escort carrier White Plains. The near miss buckles her hull, trips her circuit breakers. Green, pink, and red dye, range-finding markers from different Japanese ships, bloom in the water among the unarmored flat tops. Evans doesn't wait for orders. He's already moving. All ahead flank, make smoke, right full rudder. He turns to his gunnery officer. "Bob, we're going in." If you want to see how Commander Evans and the crew of Johnston turn the tide of the largest naval battle in history, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Commander Evans. The Japanese center force bearing down on Taffy 3 that morning represents the concentrated fury of the Imperial Japanese Navy's last gamble. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita commands 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. The force displaces over 300,000 tons. Yamato alone fires shells heavier than Johnston's torpedoes. Against this armada, Johnston, destroyers Hole and Heerman, destroyer escorts Samuel B. Roberts, Dennis, John C. Butler, and Raymond. 7 ships. Total displacement, maybe 15,000 tons. They're screening escort carriers with names like Fanshawe Bay, St. Lo, and Gambier Bay, converted merchant hulls that can barely make 18 knots. Admiral Clifton Sprague, commanding Taffy 3, orders his carriers to run east toward the dawn, laying smoke. He orders his destroyers to make a torpedo run. It's the only play in the book when you're this outgunned. Evans is already executing before the order arrives. Ernest Evans came up harder than most naval officers. Born in Pawnee, Oklahoma, in 1908, his white grandfather married a Creek Indian woman just to control her land allotment, then divorced her and disowned their child. That child became Ernest's father. His mother was full-blooded Cherokee. Evans grew up in a world where Native Americans couldn't vote in Oklahoma until 1924, where no Indians signs hung in store windows. He graduated from an all-white high school, enlisted in the Navy at 19, made it to the Naval Academy without political connections, almost unheard of for a Native American in 1927. Graduated in 1931. Spent 13 years climbing from ensign to commander. By the time Johnston was commissioned on October 27, 1943, Evans had made his reputation clear. "This is going to be a fighting ship," he told his crew that day. "I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." Now, exactly 1 year and 2 days later, he's charging into harm's way at 35 knots. Johnston closes the distance to the Japanese fleet. The destroyer zigzags toward the shell splashes, steering for the geysers. Evans learned this in the Java Sea. Japanese gunners correct their aim each salvo. You steer for where the shells just landed. The next salvo goes somewhere else. At 7:10 a.m. Gunnery officer Robert Hagen opens fire at 18,000 yards. Johnston's 5-inch guns hammer the leading Japanese cruiser. Shells begin walking toward Johnston. Battleships Nagato and Haruna unleash their 16-inch guns. Yamato fires a 6.1-inch secondary battery, 19 shells. They all miss, some by inches. Evans closes to 10,000 yards. The Japanese cruiser Kumano grows larger in his optical sight. He can see men moving on her deck. Commence torpedo attack. Johnston's Mark 15 torpedoes leave the tubes at 46 knots. 10 whitewakes streak toward Kumano. As they run, Hagen's gun crews pour over 205-inch shells into the cruiser's superstructure in 5 minutes. 45 shells hit. Fires erupt along Kumano's length. 3 torpedoes strike home. The explosions blow Kumano's bow off. The heavy cruiser, 13,000 tons, limps out of the battle. Her sister ship Suzuya breaks formation to escort the cripple. 2 Japanese heavy cruisers out of the fight before 7:30 a.m. Not bad for a destroyer that weighs less than one of Kumano's gun turrets. But Johnston's paid for it. As Evans turns to hide in his own smoke, Japanese shells find him. 3 14-inch shells from battleship Congo bracket the destroyer. Fragments spray across the deck. Then 3 6. 1-inch shells from Yamato's secondary battery tear into Johnston's bridge. 1 shell destroys the aft engine room. Another demolishes gun turrets 3, 4, and 5. The third smashes into the bridge itself, killing everyone near Evans. Shell fragments sever 3 fingers on Evans's left hand. Shrapnel tears through his shirt and into his chest. He's bleeding from a dozen places. The bridge is uninhabitable. Evans staggers aft, wrapping his mangled hand in a rag, and establishes a new command post at the stern. Johnston's down to 1 engine, making 17 knots instead of 35. Half her guns are silent. Steering control is gone. Men are turning the rudder by hand in the compartment below, Evans shouting orders down through an open hatch. It's 7:45 a.m. The battle is 15 minutes old. Admiral Sprague's carriers are running for their lives. They're Avengers and Wildcats clawing into the sky with whatever ordnance the deck crews could slap on. Depth charges, high explosive bombs, anything. Some pilots make dry runs, no weapons at all, just diving on Japanese ships to draw anti-aircraft fire away from loaded aircraft. The kamikazes will come later. Right now it's just American sailors buying time with their lives. Johnston comes out of the smoke bank. Evans sees the escort carrier Gambia Bay under fire from Japanese heavy cruiser Chikuma. Gambler Bay's thin hull is being torn apart by 8-inch shells. Evans doesn't hesitate. With 1 engine, no fire control, half his guns destroyed, and his ship already mortally wounded, he orders Johnston to engage. Commence firing on that cruiser. Draw her fire on us and away from Gambia Bay. Johnston's remaining 5-inch guns roar. At this range, maybe 7,000 yards, even the little destroyer's shells penetrate. Chikuma's superstructure erupts in flames. The heavy cruiser shifts fire from the dying escort carrier to the destroyer that just bloodied her nose. Exactly what Evans intended. Gambia Bay sinks anyway, but she takes longer. And more men get off. The Japanese think Johnston is a heavy cruiser. That's in their after-action reports. The little destroyer is putting out so much fire, maneuvering so aggressively, that experienced Japanese captains log her as a ship 3 times her size. Admiral Kurita, commanding from Yamato, becomes convinced he's facing Admiral Halsey's main battle force. The escort carriers in his optical sights look like fleet carriers. The destroyers fighting like demons must be cruisers. He's not facing Taffy 3. He's facing the entire 3rd Fleet. At 8:20 a.m., Johnston engages the battleship Haruna. 15 5-inch shells find the battleship's pagoda superstructure. They don't penetrate her armor, but they wreck her fire control and forward observation posts. Haruna turns away. Then Evans sees something worse than battleships. 7 Japanese destroyers, led by light cruiser Yahagi, are forming for a torpedo run on the American carriers. If those destroyers get inside the screen, if they're Type 93 Long Lance torpedoes reach the carriers, Taffy 3 dies. MacArthur's beachhead dies. Maybe the entire Philippines campaign dies. Johnston, burning and listing, limping on one engine with half her crew dead or wounded, turns toward the Japanese destroyer column. Commence firing. What Johnston does next breaks every tactical manual. A single crippled destroyer charges 7 fresh destroyers and a light cruiser. Evans weaves Johnston through the formation, guns blazing at point-blank range. He's so close that Japanese gunners have trouble depressing their weapons enough to hit him. Johnston's shells, meant for aircraft, not ship hulls, rake destroyer superstructures, tear through bridge windows, slaughter men at their stations. The Japanese destroyer column breaks formation. 3 destroyers turn away. 2 others collide trying to evade. Yahagi's torpedo launch is delayed, her aim disrupted. When the Japanese torpedoes finally launch, they're scattered, uncoordinated. Only 1 carrier is hit, but Johnston's luck runs out. Japanese destroyers circle back and concentrate fire. Shells hammer the American destroyer from 3 sides. Her last engine dies. The final 5-inch gun falls silent. Fires rage from bow to stern. The deck is slick with blood. Men are loading guns by hand because the hoists are destroyed. At 9:45 a.m., Evans gives the order to abandon ship. Of Johnston's crew of 327 men, 141 are still alive. They go over the side into a sea covered with oil and floating debris. 25 minutes later, Johnston rolls over. Her stern rises into the air. She slides beneath the Philippine Sea. The Japanese destroyer Yukikaze, one of the ships Johnston had engaged, comes alongside, not to finish her off, to salute. The Japanese crew lines up on deck. Their commander, Lieutenant Commander Masamichi Terarachi, stands at attention as Yukikaze passes the sinking destroyer. He's saluting the Johnston and her crew. Later, Terarachi reports seeing Commander Evans in a lifeboat, returning the salute, tears streaming down his face. Evans was among the 92 men who were alive in the water after Johnston sank, but were never seen again. No one knows if he died from his wounds, drowned when his life best failed, or was taken by sharks in the days before rescue ships arrived. His body was never recovered. Admiral Kurita's center force, convinced it's facing the main American battle fleet, retreats, the largest battleship force assembled since Jutland turns away from 7 destroyers and 6 escort carriers. Kurita's staff argues for continuing the attack. He refuses. In his mind, he's already lost 3 heavy cruisers, had his battleships damaged, and still hasn't broken through to the carriers he thinks are fleet carriers. The risk is too high. He doesn't know he's facing Taffy 3. He doesn't know the American destroyers have no torpedoes left and are almost out of ammunition. He doesn't know he could steam into Leyte Gulf unopposed and destroy every transport, every supply ship, every vessel supporting MacArthur's invasion. He turns away because Ernest Evans convinced him the cost was too high. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, 4 separate engagements across 3 days involving 282 ships and 200,000 men, ends in complete American victory. The Japanese lose 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, 9 destroyers, and 10,500 men. The Imperial Japanese Navy as a fighting force ceases to exist. But the battle is decided off Samar, where 7 American ships face down the most powerful surface fleet Japan can assemble. 2 escort carriers are sunk, sent low to the first organized kamikaze attack in naval history, Gambier Bay to Japanese gunfire. 3 destroyers go down, Johnston, Hull, and the destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts. Over 1,000 American sailors die, losses comparable to Coral Sea and Midway combined. But the Japanese are turned back. Admiral Chester Nimitz writes after the battle, "The success of Taffy 3 was nothing short of special dispensation from the Lord Almighty." Admiral William Halsey, who took 3rd Fleet north chasing Japanese carriers and left San Bernardino straight unguarded, calls it the gravest error of his career. Some historians are less charitable. They say Halsey abandoned Taffy 3, that his carriers should have been guarding the strait. That Kurita's force should never have gotten within 50 miles of the escort carriers. But the men of Taffy 3 never blamed Halsey. They blamed themselves for not doing more. Commander Ernest Evans was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, as commanding officer of the USS Johnston, in action against major units of the enemy Japanese fleet. Seriously wounded early in the engagement, Commander Evans, by his indomitable courage and brilliant professional skill, aided materially in turning back the enemy during a critical phase of the action. He was the first Native American in U.S. Navy history to receive the Medal of Honor. One of only 2 destroyer captains in World War II so honored. Johnston received the Presidential Unit Citation. She earned 6 battle stars for her year of service: Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Guam, the Marianas, Palau, and Leyte Gulf. The Navy struck her from the register on November 27, 1944, 1 month after she sank. In 2019, explorers found her wreck in 21,180 feet of water, the deepest shipwreck ever discovered. Ensign Robert Hagen, Johnston's gunnery officer, survived. He wrote, "The skipper was a fighting man from the soles of his broad feet to the ends of his straight black hair. He was an Oklahoman and proud of the Indian blood he had in him. We called him, though not to his face, the Chief. The Johnston was a fighting ship, but he was the heart and soul of her." 3 of Johnston's crew survived the battle only to die in the water before rescue ships arrived. Communication failures meant some survivors floated for 50 hours before being picked up. 45 men died on life rafts from injuries sustained in combat. Their bodies were committed to the sea. The 141 survivors scattered after the war. Most never talked about Samar. It was too big, too terrible, too impossible to explain to people who weren't there. How do you tell someone you charged a battleship in a tin can and lived? How do you explain watching your ship die? How do you describe the Japanese destroyer that saluted you as you sank? Historians call the Battle off Samar the greatest last stand in naval history. Some compare it to Thermopylae, others to the Alamo. The comparison misses the point. The Spartans died to the last man. The defenders of the Alamo were wiped out. But Taffy 3-1. Against impossible odds, outgunned 20-1, facing the most powerful battleships ever built, they turned back the Japanese fleet and saved MacArthur's invasion. They won because men like Ernest Evans existed. Because when he commissioned Johnston and said he intended to go in harm's way, he meant every word. Because when the moment came, he didn't wait for orders or permission. He just went. The Battle of Leyte Gulf secured American control of the Philippine Sea and opened the path to Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and eventually mainland Japan. It broke the back of Japanese naval power. It killed the era of the battleship and confirmed the carrier as the future of naval warfare. It was the largest naval battle in history, by tonnage, by area, by duration, by almost any metric you choose. But it was decided by men in small ships doing impossible things. On the morning of October 25, 1944, the entire strategic balance of the Pacific War pivoted on whether Ernest Evans and the crew of USS Johnston would charge or retreat. They charged. And because they charged, because they kept charging even when their ship was burning and their shipmates were dying, because they fought until Johnston literally broke apart under them, the Battle of Leyte Gulf ended in American victory. The Japanese never mounted another major naval offensive. The war in the Pacific had 7 months left to run. But after Samar, after watching destroyers attack battleships and win, the Japanese High Command knew it was over. They fought on. They sent kamikazes and organized suicidal defenses. But they knew. Taffy 3 showed them what they were up against. Not American industry or American numbers. American sailors who refused to accept that some fights can't be won. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment sharing what impacted you most about Commander Evans and his crew. Every comment helps us reach more people who need to hear these forgotten stories. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. These sailors deserve to be remembered. Let's make sure they are.